In this video, I'll look at moving, rotating, snapping, and scaling objects in 3ds Max. We need to bring the tram stop all the way up through the sidewalk and pull the streetlight up as well. We also need to pull the sidewalk down to sit cleanly under the buildings, as right now, you can see when I change to a wireframe, it's clipping through the bottom of the columns. We'll start out in a left view, pressing L for left and Z to zoom extents. This line with the zig is actually my sidewalk. I'll click on it to select it, and we can see here it's named Box 005. Along the way while you're constructing a scene, if you find things that aren't named, go through and name them. I'll call this one Sidewalk. Now I'm ready to move. I'll press W for Move. There's my Move tool, aligned to the view in this case with Y being up. I can use the plus and minus keys to upsize and downsize the tool if I need to display better. First, I'll grab it and pull it down on the Y-axis. What we can see here is that we can move, rotate, and scale things on 1, 2, or 3 axes depending on how we'd like to work. For example, holding Alt on the mouse wheel, I'll spin over into an orthographic. We can see that if I grab and pull on the Z-axis, Z is up in Max, it moves on 1. Grabbing on one of the brackets between, say, X and Y here, moves on that plane. If I grab in the middle, I can move on all 3. What I'll do then is in my left view, press Z to zoom extents and snap this object. We have very powerful snaps available here in 3ds Max. I'll do a little bit of configuration on them. Right-clicking on the 3 with the magnet, my snaps toggle. In here, what I want to do is make sure that grid points is off and vertex is turned on. I'll also go to options and make sure that the snaps use axis constraints. If you'd like to redraw your snap at a different size, there's a display size available. And I like to use a rubber band here, which shows where I went from to where I am. I'll close this dialog and press S for snap. Now I'm going to register this right here on the curb, and we can see that yellow plus indicating the snap is registering. Before I do that though, I'll click and drag on just that Y-axis to make sure the motion is constrained on one axis here. And I'll pull this up, snapping right onto the building. Now if you noticed here, my snap didn't go the first time and it actually deselected the object. What I'll do a lot of times when I'm moving things around is press spacebar for the selection lock. Now I can't let go of this object no matter where I click. Now I'll register that snap on the curb and drag up, snapping to the bottom of the building. We can see here that the tram stop is still halfway underground. But now the sidewalk is perfectly on the bottom of the doors and windows and the streetlight. In a top view then, pressing T and Z to zoom extents, I'll make sure I pull this forward or backward to align to the buildings here. This will work nicely for now as we haven't really lined up the buildings. If you like, you can pull this forward on the Y and start to make a small sidewalk here. Now at least, going to a shaded view, we can see that the buildings are on the ground and the light pole is, well, almost on the ground. Again, I'll press L for left view and F3 for wireframe. Notice as well here that I switch back and forth in my display between wire and shaded depending on what I need, and I'm moving around my view as I need to move things into place. I'll pick my light pole. I have to press spacebar to release the selection lock on the street, pick that light pole, zoom in close, press spacebar for selection lock, grab it on one of the bottom vertices, and snap it up right onto the sidewalk. What we see here is the benefit of using the axis constraints, and there's my yellow rubber band showing me clearly. I started my snap at the bottom of the street light, over here to the left of the curb. I'm grabbing on the bottom, pulling up on the Y-axis, but moving my mouse over to register on another point, and there's that yellow plus for the snap. It's great because it lets you register to things that are not directly above the object, so you can snap things perfectly into place. And the more things are snapped, the better off we'll be, as that means our objects are light tight and won't see artifacts or odd shading when we put our lights in. Now I'll go in a top view by pressing T, Z to zoom extents on that street light, and rotate it. I'll press E for rotation. If you notice here, we've got several ways of doing things in 3ds Max. Up on the top in the main toolbar, there's the Select and Move, Select and Rotate, and Select and Scale tool. Alternately, I can right-click, and there's my quad menu. This quad menu will reconfigure depending on what we're doing and what we have selected. But on the bottom right in the Transform quad, we can see I've got Move, Rotate, and Scale available as well. Finally, I can use my hotkeys, pressing W for Move, E for Rotate, R for Scale, and Q for Select. I've pressed E for Rotation, and I've pressed A to turn on my angle snap up here at the top. We can snap in Position, like we just did with the Move tool, Rotation, snapping every 5 degrees until we change it, and snapping on Percent for scaling, and also spinners, when we're clicking on a spinner to move something, for example. I'll take this light pole and click and drag, watching the numbers right above it to rotate it 90 degrees. Now I'll press W to move, zoom out a little bit, click on the brackets between the X and Y axes, and pull this over right onto my sidewalk. I'll go into left view, press Z to zoom extents, and pan over to look at my tram stop as well. I'll pick it, pressing spacebar to release the selection lock, selecting it, and spacebar to lock again, grabbing on one of the bottom feet and snapping right up onto the sidewalk. Then in a top view, moving it over and placing this bus stop right here next to the curb and gutter. We haven't really moved the buildings yet, so I need to get those in place before I space out the streetlights. But at least I've got the things that need to be on the sidewalk actually on the sidewalk, like the tram stop and streetlight. Now for the buildings. I'll press spacebar to release the selection lock, and in a top view we can see the first building here. The way I've built these is really usable from one or two sides only. This building looks pretty reasonable from the lobby and the front balconies and left side, but around the right side it's open. It's very common to build things like this in a stage set for animation, where we see only the parts we need of an object, and the rest of it is blank or simply not built. That way we're not building excessive geometry and not wasting our time on things we're not going to need. I'm going to group these buildings, choosing Group and Group, just like I did before, and I'll name this Building 1. In my top view again, pressing F3 for wireframe, I'll group the next buildings as well, selecting all the objects by dragging a marquee around them, choosing Group, Group, and naming. These buildings are in a pretty good place here. I may want to move them around a little bit, and now that they're grouped, they're very easy. I can press S to turn off my snap and pull these apart just a little bit, maybe leaving the balconies on one sticking out, or reordering them if I need. I'll take Building 3 and pull it back just a little bit, so as I look past Building 2 I see the side of 3. I've also made some extra parts over here, and I'll simply select them and pull them out of the way. We'll use these extra pieces, these kind of free sections of buildings here, as extra elements when we got our camera in place and are composing our scene. For now though, I'm picking one, holding Control and picking the others, and pressing spacebar for selection lock when I'm done. I'll take these extra elements and just pull them back in the scene. If you miss one like I just did, press Control Z, release the selection lock with the spacebar, and add to that selection. I'll hold Control and click on this panel I missed. This is where pressing F4 for wireframe on shaded or edged faces is very helpful. Now I'll press the spacebar for selection lock and pull these back. What I intended these extra elements as are buildings we can't see the bottom floors of, but we need to see their middles and tops as we crane up in the scene. If you'd like, if the streetlight feels too tall, you can scale it just a little bit. Right now, for example, if I look in a perspective view by pressing P for perspective and spin around onto the street, it feels like maybe this streetlight could shrink just a touch, so it's a little more intimate here, as it's very tall next to the bus stop. I'll select it, press Z to zoom extents, and press R for scale. In our scale then, we've got some different ways to work. Right now, I'm using Select Non-Uniform Scale, the middle option, letting me scale on one axis at a time if I'd like. There's Uniform Scale up at the top, which lets me scale the whole object on all three axes, as you can see highlighted here, down. Down at the bottom in the X, Y, and Z fields, I can read the percentage I'm scaling. What I'll do to scale this slightly is pick Select and Uniform Scale. Make sure I grab in the middle of the Scale tool so all three planes highlight in white, and click and drag and scale this down, maybe about 85%. I think that looks a little better. It's right about at the second story height here without glaring in anybody's windows. A smaller street light over the bus stop in what will be my dark city. In the next video then, we'll clone out the street lights in a couple of bus stops and see what else we need to flesh out this cityscape.